Welcome Caspill 2 secret agent. Execute retinal scan. Access granted. Today's mission. Good morning, agent. Your mission for today is to learn the Spanish colonization in the Philippines 1565 to 1896. Watch and learn. Your lesson will include the following. Objectives of Spain, strategies for pacification, Spanish expedition for the Philippines, political, economic, social, cultural, religious, policies, reaction of Filipinos, and development of Philippine nation. Objectives of Spain. The Pacific voyages of the late 18th century had, of course, been preceded by the extraordinary explosion outward of the Spanish and Portuguese in the 15th and 16th centuries. Their motives were evident enough and often stated: the quest for gold, God, and glory as the crusading spirit, which had led to the reconquest of Spain from the Muslims, then spilled out onto the larger global arena with the burning ambition to claim new souls for the Holy Catholic Church and new wealth and territory for the King of Spain. Gold, trade under colonialism. Gold refers to the search for material gained through acquiring and selling Asian spices, African slaves, American metals, and other resources. Spain was searching for the so-called Spice Island, and also with the fact that they didn't reach the said island for certain reasons such as Muslims taking monopoly over a trading gateway, making them find another way but arrive instead in the Philippines, a home-own island. As merchants gained influence in late medieval Western Europe, they convinced their governments to establish a direct connection to the lucrative Asian trade, leading to the first European voyages of discovery in the 1400s. Making the food more palatable to the most discriminating medieval tastes triggered the search for spices of all sorts. Pepper, cinnamon, cloves, ginger, nutmeg, which were indigenous to the East. The inclusion of Asian trade to that of Europe led not only to the flow of economic products and the wealth of Asia to European societies but also to the dynamic interaction of cultures. The tremendous profits European trade brought to nation-states, particularly Portugal and Spain, intensified European rivalries for the fabled source of Oriental products. The Spaniards closed the ports of Manila to all countries except Mexico. Thus, the Manila-Acapulco trade, better known as the galleon trade, was born, and because the Spaniards were so engrossed in making profits from the galleon trade, they hardly had any time to further exploit our natural resources. God, the power of faith. God refers to the militant crusading and missionary traditions of Christianity, characterized in part by rivalry with Islam and hatred of non-Christian religion. Spanish colonizers actually went to the Philippines to fulfill the death wish of Isabel I, who said that she would donate all her wealth for the conversion of the Indies. This was fulfilled by Felipe I. Religion was another reason for exploration and colonization. When Protestants rebelled against the Catholic Church, calling for its reform, the Catholic Church launched the Counter-Reformation. This was a time when Catholic nations did everything they could to convert new believers to Catholicism. Establishing a new colony was an opportunity for the Church to convert the natives. Spanish missionaries and friars were able to spread Christianity in Luzon and Visayas but Mindanao, because Mindanao was very resistant during that time. The spreading of Christianity was never easy for Spaniards since they are already Muslim settlement in Mindanao. However, people in the lowlands were forced to practice different ceremonies like baptism, reduction policies, the beginning of Passion Play, and even the crucifixion of Christ. Friars became people with high political positions and social classes were implemented. Aside from the Catholic faith that the Spaniards influenced, there are certain things and customs that were carried up to this generation. One of those traditions is the belief in relics, idols and images of the saints. Glory. Trace of colonization. Ultimately, it was not just Isabel's wish which helped the Philippines to be retained by Spain, it was the glory. They would not abandon the Philippines to either British or Portuguese, because this would bring shame to Spain. Instead, Felipe III boasted that the sun never sets on Spanish soil, because of the Philippines. Also, glory was to be found in the adventure and in the land they might claim, making them rich lords instead of poor sailors. Many average people longed to have celebrity status, so they would set out on an adventurous voyage on the open seas to see what they could find. Glory alludes to the competition between monarchies. The Europeans were competing with one another to have the most power. Based on mercantilism, nations believed their wealth would increase with each new colony they acquired. European nations, France, Spain, England, and the Netherlands, believed they would be the most powerful if they had more colonies than their neighbors. The European countries became rivals for power. Each nation wanted to be the best. Men who won battles or performed other great deeds were often rewarded by titles of nobility, land, money, and laborers. Since there was little land to be had in Europe, the discovery of huge amounts of land in the New World became a big motivator for individuals to seek personal glory there. The time the Philippines is under Imperial Spain, its discovery is propelled by gold, God, and glory.
Strategies for pacification. The Spaniards have established several strategies to achieve pacification over the natives who are settled in the Philippine archipelago wherein the Spaniards have touched down. This is to settle any future confrontation against those who would want to rebel, making colonization of the Philippine Islands fairly easier to the Spaniards in order to achieve the 3 Gs, one of which was the cross and sword, and the other one, divide et impera. The Spaniards were also open for the local traditions of other natives that settles peace in between them. Such example is Sandugoan. Blood Compact. Blood Compact or Sandugoan was an ancient ritual performed by their local natives that symbolizes unity between the two factions, specifically the Spaniards and the native tribes. It was done by slightly cutting one of the wrists of both leaders of opposing factions. Pour the blood into a cup or bowl. Infuse the blood with the liquid, usually wine, and finally consume the fluid. Numerous blood compacts were performed during the Spanish colonization in the Philippines. One of the well-known blood compacts during that time was that of Humabon, the Raja of Cebu, and Ferdinand Magellan, a Portuguese explorer. Another prominent blood compact was that of Sikatuna, the Dato of Bohol, and Miguel Lopez de Legazpi, a Spanish explorer, which was held in Loay, Bohol. A blood compact shrine was built at Tagbilaran City as a resemblance of such event. Cross and sword. The cross and sword were the symbols mainly used by the Spaniards in their tactics in colonizing the Philippines. The Spaniards used the cross as a symbol of one of their tactics in attaining pacification, which represented the religion Christianity. On the other hand, the sword was used as a symbol of force or violence, which resulted in direct confrontation to the natives who refused in converting into Christianity. Cross. The cross mainly focuses on the evangelization of the natives. The datus and his family will be the first ones to convert first, so that in a way, the other natives, which are the followers of the datu, would convert to Christianity as well. In order for the natives to successfully convert into Christianity, they must abandon their current religion, which is animism. Next, the natives were given Doctrina Christiana, a book that consists of songs, prayers, hymns, and such, which were translated into the native language that the Indians are obliged to memorize in order for them to participate in religious activities such as daily prayers as well as having to attend Mass. This is one of the ideal strategies of the Spaniards to achieve pacification, since there will be no bloodshed occurring in the aftermath if everyone willingly submitted to Christianity. In the event that the natives refuse to convert to Christianity, the Spaniards have organized a policy called Entrada. It was established for those who would reject conversion, and the punishment of that would be a direct attack. Only the Spanish forces are responsible for the implementation of the policy. Divide et impera. The Spaniards have adopted this strategy from the Greek and Roman times, wherein the Spaniards would dare a large group of rebellion, subdividing them into smaller groups to be able to gain more territorial control, stronger manpower or army, as well as blocking the smaller groups of rebellion to unite, resulting into an isolation. Part of the strategy was the recruitment of the local natives who converted to Christians or Indios, and used these natives as a force against their own race, instead of assigning Spanish soldiers to do the work. One significant event was that of Diego Silang, who pursued to unite the whole Ilocano nation, but the Spaniards have assigned local natives from parts of Macabebe, Pampanga, as enforcers against Diego Silang's troops. Thus, divide et impera was applied in maintaining pacification as well as minimizing unity between rebellions from one region to another.
The Spanish expeditions to the Philippines. The first expedition was led by Ferdinand Magellan. His primary goal was to find a westward route to the Spice Islands in Indonesia. On his way, he encountered the Philippines. He landed on Homonhonon Island on March 16, 1521. He converted some of the Cebuano natives to Christianity and formed alliances. Unfortunately, Lapu-Lapu, chief of Mactan, was against the foreign invaders, which led to a conflict. This culminated in a battle of Mactan in April 27, 1521, where 1,000 Cebuanos and 60 of Magellan's men went against 1,500 of Lapu-Lapu's men. As a result of the battle, Magellan was killed in action by one of Lapu-Lapu's men, and thus ending his expedition. The subsequent expeditions were led by Garcia Joffre Loaiza, Sebastian Cadot, Alvaro de Saavedra, Ruy Lopez de Villalobos, and Miguel Lopez de Legazpi. Only the last two expeditions were able to successfully reach the Philippines. Villalobos reached Mindanao on February 2, 1543. There, he established a colony in Sarangani but was unable to stay there due to insufficient food supplies. His most significant contribution was naming the Philippines Las Islas Filipinas after Prince Philip, son of King Charles I. After a while, Miguel Lopez de Legazpi followed in his expedition to the Philippines, where he successfully colonized it. He arrived on February 13, 1565. He first arrived in Cebu and made his way to Leyte, Camiguin, then Bohol. In April 27, 1565, Legazpi returned to Cebu and destroyed Rahatupa's town. King Philip II ordered 2,100 men from Mexico to help Legazpi establish Fuerza de San Pedro, which became the outpost of Spain in the Philippines. Legazpi ordered Martin de Goiti to lead an expedition to Manila with 300 men. Initially, Raja Soliman welcomed Martin de Goiti and his people, but eventually grew hostile, which led to battle. Unfortunately, the Filipinos lost this battle because the Spaniards were better armed. Eventually, Legazpi followed to Manila and conquered it, making alliances with certain Rajas. In 1571, Legazpi ordered the construction of walled city in Intramuros and proclaimed it as the seat of the government and capital of the colony. Legazpi's body can still be found there today in the San Agustin Church within Intramuros.
Political policies. Spain established a central government in the Philippines, which replaced the independent barangays of the natives. For the first time, the Philippine archipelago became one whole nation. Spain ruled over the Philippines overseas. The Spanish king governed the islands through the Viceroy of Mexico, which was another colony of Spain. However, when Mexico gained independence in 1821, the Spanish king ruled the Philippines through a governor-general who resided in the Philippines. The centralized government was composed of two branches, the national government and the local government. The national government is purely formed of Spanish officials. They collected taxes, built schools, and other public works, and also maintained peace and order in the country. The local government was in charge of provinces, cities, towns, and municipalities. Converted natives could take part in the local government as gobernadorcillos and cabezas. At that time, there was a union of the church and state. The governor-general is equal to the archbishop in terms of their power. Also, friars played an important role in the Philippine society, and there were many of them. They were known as the Augustinians, Franciscans, Jesuits, Dominicans, and Recollects. Economic policies. During the Spanish period, one of their main goals was to exploit the Philippines. There were numerous policies which the natives had to follow, such as the Bandala system, galleon trade, tobacco monopoly, tributo or tributes, and Comenda system, and Polo y Servicio. The Bandala system was the forced sale of native products, such as agricultural crops, to the government. The natives were only given promissory notes as their form of payment. The galleon trade, also known as Manila-Acapulco trade, since it was trading between Manila and Acapulco, Mexico. This monopoly trade governed by the Spaniards lasted for 250 years. The tobacco monopoly was the exclusive control of tobacco plantation by the Spanish government. The tributo or tributes were payment in the form of cash or products given to the Spanish government to shoulder the expenses of the colony. The encomienda is a portion of land given by the King of Spain to an encomendero or a loyal Spaniard for the meritocratic acts executed for the pacification of the colony. Lastly, the Polo y Servicio was established as a form of forced labor enforced to all men ranging in ages of 16 to 60 years old. They were required to render forced labor to the Spanish government for a certain period each year.
How are social classes defined in Spain? Social stratification is the classification of people into social classes. It refers to the ranking among people along economic and cultural attributes such as income and years of education. Social class is defined by relations of ownership or control or resources such as physical, financial, and organizational. What are the three social classes of Spain? The three social classes of Spain are upper class, middle class, and lower class. Members of the upper class tend to have jobs that preside over other people. Some jobs that they might have are managers, business owners, entrepreneurs, and professionals. While most jobs in the country are considered middle-class jobs, some of the jobs of middle-class members are private and public employees of transport, repairs and domestic services, and others own their small businesses. Lastly, members of the lower class are thought to have the more laborious jobs. Some examples of jobs that lower class members are sales and supervisory personnel, farmers, and various laborious workers. As for the social pyramid, the highest group under the social pyramid is called the peninsulares or insulares. The Peninsulares are full-blooded Spanish living in the Philippines and born in Spain, while the Insulares are full-blooded Spanish living and born in the Philippines. Next, we have the Ilustrados, also known as the Enlightened Ones. They are the wealthy group of individuals born in the Philippines and were able to study abroad. The Chinese or Spanish mestizos are a group that consists of people with mixed racial origins and economically sufficient. Lastly, the Indio or Sanglay are the last group in the social pyramid. The Indios are the native or full-blooded Filipinos, while the Sanglay are full-blooded Chinese living in the Philippines. Many Spanish words found their way into the Tagalog and Visayan languages. The Spanish words somehow fitted into the phonetic patterns of the Filipino languages. These Spanish words like mesa or adobo and others are commonly used today in the daily practical transactions of the Filipinos. Ironically, the friars came up with excellent studies on Filipino culture and languages, even as they sought to overthrow the same culture through their implantation of Spanish civilization. When the Spaniards arrived in the Philippines in 1521, the colonizers used art as a tool to propagate the Catholic faith through beautiful images. With communication as a problem, the friars used images to explain the concepts behind Catholicism and to tell the stories of Christ's life and passion. Images of the Holy Family and the saints were introduced to the Filipino psyche through carved santos, the Via Crucis or Station of the Cross, engravings on estampas and estampitas, and through paintings on church walls. The art of the Philippines is very diverse. It includes painting, dancing, weaving, sculpting, engraving, pottery, and other forms of art. When the Spaniards came to our country, they introduced us to Christianity, wherein Filipinos should be baptized and be converted into Christians. With this, all of the ancient beliefs were changed and the Roman Catholicism started. It is the predominant religion and the largest Christian denomination, with estimates of approximately 7 to 80% of the population in the country belonging to this faith. The country has a significant Spanish Catholic tradition, and the Spanish-style Catholicism is embedded in the culture, which was acquired from the friars or priests. Here, the church is dominating the people because they have a great influence on Philippine society and politics.
Spanish period. Welcome to the reaction of the Filipinos during the Spanish period. Here, we are to talk about how the Filipinos reacted about the Spanish colonization. The Philippine Revolution, the first against Western colonial rule in Asia, was directed against Spain, which had colonized the Philippines since 1565. The revolution against Spain had two phases. The first, declaration of defiance against Spanish rule on August 23, 1896. Second, from the return to the outbreak of the
Filipino-American War in February 1899. During the Spanish period, the Filipinos were unsatisfied with Spanish rule due to the being abused with slavery, forced labor. The laborers were seldom paid their wages. They were separated from their families by being made to work in distant areas. They were not given food. They were shamefully overworked, and thousands of Filipino laborers died at the work sites as a result. The Battle of Mactan, which was held in 1521, was marked the first resistance of the Filipinos against Spain. This event has shown that the natives lacked unity amongst themselves and that they didn't feel that they were one in nation. And the reasons behind this include their personal and political interests, their desire to retain political power, economic exploitation, and to be against Catholicism. First, the reaction of the Indios. The Christian people of the Philippines were referred to as Indios. Indio is a general term applied to native Austronesians as a legal classification, and it was only applied to the Christianized natives who lived in the proximity to the Spanish colonies.
The reaction to the Spanish rule was that they created a rebellion that had 26 revolts in 26 different areas, times, and reasons. Some of the revolts were the Dagohoy Revolt, Panay Revolt, Silang Revolt, Pula Revolt, and however, several revolts failed to accomplish its goals and objectives as a larger percentage of the population sided with the Spaniards and fought to put down these results. The Indios were not aware that they did not show how nationalism is in their country. They defined themselves without even considering other factors and may affect the revolt against Spaniards. The reaction of the Infieles. The Infieles, also called as infidels, are indigenous people that are unbaptized and non-Christian atheists and Austronesians living in towns. Their reaction towards the Spanish rule was a retreat. They did not cause a large harm in the community since they were driven from hinterlands. The upland societies were naturally outside the immediate concern of Spanish interests, and the cliffs and forests in their hinterland were difficult and inaccessible, allowing the infieles in effect relative security. Thus, the infieles, which were peripheral to colonial administration, were not only able to preserve their own culture but also thwarted Christianization process, separating themselves from the newly evolved Christian community. Lastly, the reaction of the Moros. The Moro people, or Bangsamoro, is another group of indigenous Muslims in the Philippines. These people are the ones who form the largest non-Catholic group in the country, which approximately consisted of 5% of our population during the Spanish period. The term Moros is a Spanish word from the Latin word Mauros. The Spaniards had invaded the Moro territory during the Spanish times. They began erecting military stations and garrisons with Catholic missions, which attracted Christianized of civilian settlements. Spain was under Inquisition, which ordered Jews and Muslims to convert to Roman Catholicism. The Spaniards tried to ban and suppress Islam in areas they conquered. Feeling threatened by these actions, the Moors decided to challenge the Spanish government. They began conducting raids on Christian coastal towns. The Spanish-Moro conflict started at the face of Castle War of Spain and Brunei that created the war between Spaniards and Moros. This was a war that made use of thousands of converted colonial subjects, misinformed Indios, effective use of the church and churchmen against people who refused to be their subjects. The westward push of Christianity collided with the eastward thrust of Islam over 440 years ago in the islands we now call the Philippines. Although first claimed for Spain by Ferdinand Magellan in 1521, it was not until 1565 that the Spanish conquistadors, with cross in one hand, sword in another, began a conquest of islands. After almost 330 years of trying, by 1898 the Spanish failed to fully conquer and subdue the southern Muslim homelands known as La Tierra del Moros, or the Land of the Moros. By the time the Spanish were forced to abandon the Philippine Islands by the United States, that they only had come to control a handful of small, fortified port cities. Spanish sovereignty never extended beyond the parapets of these few miserable and remote outposts.
Secularization is defined as a process where a society slowly transforms from having that close identification with the religious institution to a more separated relationship. In the Philippines, the secularization movement was considered to be the dawn of Philippine nationalism, particularly after the execution of Gomburza. There were two kinds of priests who served the Catholic Church. These were the regulars and the seculars. The regular priests, such as the Franciscans, Recollects, Dominicans, and Augustinians, belonged to religious orders, and their main task was to spread Christianity. The secular priests did not belong to any religious order and were under the supervision of the bishops. They were the Filipinos trained specifically to run the parishes. The conflict began when the bishops insisted on visiting the parishes that were run by the regular priests. The regular priests refused these visits, saying that they were not under the bishop's jurisdiction. Secularism began in 1861 when the Jesuits, who were exiled from the country in 1768 because the Spanish authority disliked certain policies of the order, returned to the Philippines and regained power over the Mindanao parishes from the Recollects who took over during their absence. The colonial government acceded to the laws of the Recollects and presented them the parishes of Manila and Cavite. The Filipino secular priests, the original administrators of the parishes, naturally protested. The secularization movement was headed by the Gomburza, a group named after three Catholic priests, Fathers Mariano Gomez, Jose Apolonio Burgos, and Jacinto Zamora, who campaigned for the reform of the Spanish colonial government. The priests were executed through Aguabrote in Bagumbayan, Manila, on February 17, 1872, for allegedly initiating the Cavite Mutiny. The Spanish were outraged and the priests were called filibusteros, which literally meant freebooter. The Gomburza advocated the right of the native secular clergy to assignment in the parishes over the newly arrived Spanish friars in the country. The Second Propaganda Movement. Between 1872 and 1892, a national consciousness was growing among the members of the Filipino community. The events that occurred during these years invited the Ilustrados to do something to preserve the Creole ideas. Seeing the impossibility of a revolution against the brutal reign of the Spaniards, convinced the Ilustrados to leave the country to pursue their studies. Their sense of nationalism, coupled with freedom in Europe, saw the beginning of the propaganda movement. The propaganda movement was organized for literary and cultural purposes, more than for political ends, where the propagandists strove to encourage the Spanish to be more aware about the needs of the Philippines and to create a closer and more equal association of the islands and the motherland. The propagandists mainly aimed for the representation of the Philippines in the Cortes Generales, the secularization of the clergy, the legalization of Spanish and Filipino equality, the creation of a public school system independent of the friars, the abolition of the Polo y Servicio and the Vandala, the guarantee of basic freedoms of speech and association, and lastly, equal opportunity for Filipinos and Spanish to enter government service, among others. The movement mostly used literature to campaign for change. They saw the need to create awareness and equip the people with knowledge about the issues. Marcelo H. del Pilar, Haciano Lopez Jaina, and Jose Rizal sounded the trumpets of Filipino nationalism through their writings and oration. Their main work was the La Solidaridad, a newspaper first published on December 13, 1888 at Barcelona. Jose Rizal, a notable figure of the propaganda movement, wrote the Noli Me Tangere and El Filibusterismo. The novels exposed the oppression of the Spaniards and wrote the increasing anti-peninsular sentiments. It did not discourage the people that a revolution was not the solution for independence. Rather, it urged them towards a revolution. This caused Rizal's arrest, which led to an armed resistance against Spanish rule, and eventually the independence of the Philippines. The propaganda movement can be seen as a precursor used by Filipinos in their quest for independence from Spain. The objectives of the second propaganda movement are recognition of the Philippines as a province of Spain, legal equality for both Filipinos and Spaniards, Philippine representation in the Spanish Cortes, secularization of Philippine parishes, recognition of human rights such as free speech and association, and lastly, end to the animal obligation of forced labor. The last movement, or the KKK, aimed to unite the Filipinos into one solid nation and to fight for Philippine independence from Spain. The KKK was a Philippine Revolutionary Society founded along Azcaraga Street in Tondo, Manila, by Filipino patriots Andres Bonifacio, Teodoro Plata, Ladislao Diwa, and others on the night of July 7, 1892, when Jose Rizal, their symbol of freedom, was exiled to Dapitan. The men gathered and performed the ancient blood compact and signed their membership papers with their own blood. It was agreed to win more members to the society by means of a triangle method in which an original member would take in two new members who did not know each other. These aspiring applicants were given standard initiation rites to become members of the society. Also agreed upon the meeting was the payment of an entrance fee of 1 real fuerte, equivalent to 25 centavos, and a monthly due of a media reel, about 12 centavos. At first, the katipunan was only open for male Filipinos. Not later then, women were accepted in the society. The KKK members agreed on the following objectives. The political goal was to completely separate the Philippines from Spain after declaring the country's independence. The moral goal was to teach the Filipinos good manners, cleanliness, hygiene, fine morals, and how to guard themselves against religious fanaticism. The civic goal was to encourage Filipinos to help themselves and to defend the poor oppressed. A provincial council called the Sangguniang Bayan was established, and in each town was an organized council called Sangguniang Barangay. The towns which supported the Katipunan cause were given symbolic names, such as Magdiwang, to celebrate for Noveleta; Magdalo, to come for Kawit Cavite; Magwagi, to win for Naik; Magtagumpay, to succeed for Maragondon; Walang Tinag, never diminished, to Indang; and Halige, aggregate, for Imos, all of which are provinces of Cavite. Being a secret society, its members are subjected to utmost secrecy and are expected to abide with the rules established by the society. The Katipunan has its own publication, Ang Kalayaan, or the Liberty, that had its first and last print on March 1896. The secret society's existence was revealed to the Spanish authorities after a member named Teodoro Patino confessed Katipunan's illegal activities to his sister, the mother portress of Mandaluyong Orphanage. By the time the society was uncovered, the American writer James Leroy estimated the strength of the Katipunan at 100,000 to 400,000 members. 7 days after the wrong turn of history, on August 26, 1896, Bonifacio and his men tore their cedulas during the infamous cry of Pugadlawin. That started the Philippine Revolution.
Good luck, Caspill 2 secret agent. The world is counting on you. End mission. Thank you, amazing agent. Mission complete. Report sent to Dr. Ale de la Cruz. Submitted by Austria, Vince, Aquino, Patrick, Caligday, Jane, Ku, Diane, Ong, Era, Samarano, Gillian, Ju, Eliza.